Schools are not CAMHS, but increasingly they are expected to operate like they are. And when education absorbs responsibilities it was never designed to hold, something else quietly gives way. Passion without boundaries leads to institutional exhaustion. When schools stretch endlessly to compensate for wider system gaps, staff fatigue increases. Leaders absorb emotional strain. Teachers become frontline mental health responders, and slowly the core purpose of education gets diluted. Before we dive back in, I want to say something to head teachers listening. Attendance rarely improves through effort alone. It improves through clarity and alignment. If attendance still feels fragile in your setting, you can now apply for a senior attendance and leadership review. It begins with a short strategic assessment. If eligible, you'll be invited to claim a private one-to-one strategy session valued and fully funded at £700. That session includes not only a focused leadership review, but also a suite of practical strategic tools, frameworks and templates designed to support your next 90 days and reduce reactive pressure in your context. This is not a compliance audit. This is an opportunity. It's a structured strategic intervention for senior leaders. If this feels relevant to you and your current context, then you can apply now using the link in the show notes or by scanning the code on screen. And now let's return back to the episode. This is Headship After Hours. I'm Paul Collin, over 25 years in education, more than a decade in headship and executive leadership. In fact, I grew up attending a challenging school and I was told I would never make headship. That drive led me here. I have led some of the most complex schools in the UK, improving behaviour, stabilising attendance, rebuilding culture and strengthening retention, restoring community trust in our UK schools. I've carried the full weight of inspection, accountability, parental scrutiny and system pressure. I'm a Future Leaders alumni with an NPQ-H and an NPQ-EL Level 7 Executive Coaching Accreditation. But more importantly, still leading. I'm still a head teacher. I still work in schools and I support head teachers navigating difficult realities. This is not theory. I'm not commenting from the sidelines. This is a podcast for school leaders who know the weight and want to listen to someone that has experienced the weight as well, knowing what it feels like. This space exists to share it, reflect on it, and build something more sustainable together. A podcast for school leaders who carry real responsibility. Let's talk. Schools are not CAMHS, but increasingly they're expected to operate like they are. And when education absorbs responsibilities it was never designed to hold, something else quietly gives way. Let me start clearly by saying this. Young people's mental health challenges are, of course, real. Anxiety is rising, complex trauma is present, neurodiversity awareness is growing, access to specialists' services is extremely stretched. None of that is, of course, in question. The challenge is, though, this. Schools were designed to educate, to nurture, to socialise, to safeguard, but not to replace clinical provision. And yet, increasingly, head teachers are managing situations that require specialist intervention without specialist capacity, without clinical training, and of course, without system backup. I remember sitting in a meeting with a family who were absolutely desperate. They had been waiting months for CAMHS and a CAMHS referral. Their child was struggling deeply. And they looked as that they needed that support. They looked at the school, though, as if we could fix it. We supported, of course we did. We adapted timetables, we provided pastoral care, we made appropriate referrals. But there was a moment of honesty internally in myself. We are not clinicians. We are not medical professionals. And pretending we are helps nobody. This is not rejecting responsibility, of course. It's about defining it Compassion without boundaries leads to institutional exhaustion. When schools stretch endlessly to compensate for wider system gaps, staff fatigue increases. Leaders absorb emotional strain. Teachers become frontline mental health responders. And slowly, the core purpose of education gets diluted. There are three truths we must hold simultaneously together. First, schools generally play a crucial role in mental health and health support. Secondly, schools cannot replace specialist services. And third, leadership requires clarity around those boundaries. Without that clarity, guilt can creep in. We should be doing more. Are we failing this child? Could we try something else? That internal narrative drains leaders, it drains staff, it can drain the school. In one of the schools I led, we reached a turning point. We were responding to everything, every emotional crisis, every complex presentation, every escalation. Staff were exhausted. So we stepped back and asked, what is our role? What is not our role? And how do we communicate all of that compassionately? That sense of clarity changed the tone. We strengthened early intervention systems. We trained staff appropriately. We built relationships with external agencies that could truly support our young people. But we also became explicit. We are educators. We will, of course, support. We will definitely adapt, but we cannot replace clinical pathways. That was not abandonment. It was alignment. When leaders fail to set boundaries, culture absorbs that sense of confusion. When leaders set boundaries really clearly, culture absorbs stability. And stability is what vulnerable students need the most. That sense of consistency. Not reactive panic, not overextension, not false promises, calm, consistent structure. There is also something personal here, though, for leaders. When you try to fix everything, you quietly carry everything. That becomes just unsustainable. You begin to internalize system failure. You feel responsible for all those waiting lists, those funding gaps, the national policy decisions. But responsibility and control are not the same. Mature leadership recognizes the difference. If you are listening and feeling stretched by this area, then ask yourself this. Are we trying to replace something we were never designed to be? Where do we need firmer referral pathways? Where do we need clearer language with our families and community? And where do we need to protect staff capacity in order for them to be able to really support our student community? Because protecting capacity is not cold. It is strategic compassion. Students need schools that are stable. Staff need leadership that is boundaried. And leaders need permission to say, this matters deeply. And we cannot solve it alone. That is, of course, not weakness. That is system awareness. Schools are not CAMHS, but they can be powerful communities of belonging. And belonging, when done well, prevents escalation before intervention is needed. That is where our strength as leaders and as schools lies, not in replacing services, but in building culture. If something in this episode resonated, well, sit with it for a moment. Leadership is not meant to be carried in silence. If this conversation has helped you feel less alone as a leader, well, that matters. If you're a head teacher carrying attendance pressure, you can apply for the Senior Attendance and Leadership Review. It starts with a short assessment. Eligible leaders are invited then to claim a fully funded £700 private strategic session. including practical leadership tools to support a clear 90-day attendance focus. You can apply now using the link in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Let's stay connected.